Takuto's final thoughts were an awareness of his own death. After a long period of battling illness, Takuto left this world at the age of 18. Although slightly irritated, he was surprised to find himself accepting it quite calmly. His subconscious and senses were gradually sinking into darkness, his body seemingly dissolving into nothingness. So this was what it felt like. Suddenly, Takuto felt something touch his hand, unable to identify it, a scent like grass, the space around him brightening. Opening his eyes, the surroundings and the fresh air made him think he was in eternity. A female voice startled him, making him exclaim that this couldn't be real. Takuto was astonished to see Atu, the girl in splendid attire before him. Atu was one of the hero units in the game simulating the rule of the Eternal Kingdom. Takuto had played this game day after day in his sickbed, alone without his parents. He was so immersed in the game that he forgot his enduring loneliness, eventually becoming the top player, revered as a legendary master. It was Atu's presence that marked his only achievement in life before his death. Atu, seeing Takuto's astonished reaction, couldn't help but laugh. To her, Takuto would always be the king, always a legend. Not only expressing admiration for Takuto, Atu also remembered everything he had taught her, the times they journeyed together to conquer the world in the game, and all things related to Takuto. Atu appeared here before she realized it, feeling this place was much like the world in the Eternal Kingdom. Takuto temporarily called this the Nameless Place. Atu approached Takuto and knelt down, requesting him to start over and build their own kingdom. Takuto hesitated but eventually wanted to try building a kingdom. Agreeing with Atu, they officially began their new nation. Atu was thrilled, naming herself Atu Mud, the wild child of the crumbling mud world. The system message on the screen announced the new player, Ira Takuto, the Minogra civilization with a demonic attribute. Takuto was confident as he was the first to win the game with Minogra, using the secret strategy of closed harbor. Both Takuto and Atu were extremely excited. Although known as the Devious Kingdom in the game's information, the Minogra civilization focused on internal governance, not warfare, concentrating all strength on internal power. Meanwhile, in a forest, a dark force was preparing to execute a sinister plan. Takuto and Atu were startled by the call of a long-legged spy bug. Although they knew about this species in the game, they couldn't believe how terrifying it was in reality. The bug obediently followed Takuto's command, setting off to diligently survey the forest. Takuto's initial MP was 200, but he had to spend 100 mana to summon the long-legged bug to determine their current location. He was contemplating how to use his mana efficiently to avoid waste. Atu, as a hero unit, would grow stronger over time. However, her current combat strength was only 3, so she would still be overwhelmed by stronger opponents. Takuto had a grasp of the forest's terrain, which was dense and devoid of any other creatures. Atu felt slightly disheartened as she couldn't assist her master. Takuto's encouragement made her extremely cheerful. The bug tried to communicate with Takuto, sharing a screen of information gathered through its eyes, the location of the Dark Elf settlement. Just as Takuto decided to gather information about the Dark Elves, they encountered other elves from the group. The Dark Elves were physically exhausted. Even the young ones, who were given priority for food, couldn't withstand it and fainted in their parents' arms. Jia, the leader of the Dark Elves, realized the situation was dire and they couldn't proceed further. The elder Mwatar knew he couldn't stop Jia, but he still wanted to speak with him before continuing. Mwatar mentioned that the cursed forest lay upon a land untouched by anyone. Despite the lush vegetation, rumors abounded that a demonic force was sealed here, the King of Ruins. Mwatar reminded Jia not to worry about it but to always stay vigilant in the forest. Jia was skeptical, but the Dark Elves would starve if they didn't act immediately. He acknowledged the strangeness of the forest but couldn't halt their progress due to superstitions, as they had no other choice. Those who still had strength needed to find food for the exhausted. At this moment, Jia saw Takuto and Atu, but in Jia's eyes, Takuto appeared as a terrifying shadow. Jia reminded himself to be careful with his words before approaching Takuto and kneeling down. Jia introduced himself as Jia Najeev, a dark elf from the Mazarama tribe, and also the leader of the Dark Elves. He spoke humbly, thinking Takuto was the king of this territory, and asked for forgiveness for intruding without permission. Atu inquired about what brought Jia to this area. Sensing Atu's close relationship with the shadow, Jia thought she might be dangerous too and explained that their leader had unjustly punished them and exiled them from their homeland. Atu's impatient demeanor made Jia and everyone else extremely tense. In his shadowy form, Takuto suddenly commented on how thin and weak Jia looked. Jia became more flustered, explaining that their village had run out of food, forcing them to hide in the forest to evade pursuers, but they hadn't been able to find anything, resulting in many going hungry for a week. Jia, a responsible leader, kneeled down, driven by his desire to protect his people, pondering why the mere wish to live was worthy of death. Takuto threw an apple to Jia. While Jia was still confused about what had just happened, two people beside him started eating it voraciously. They had not eaten for days and were so moved they were brought to tears. Takuto then gave them more fruit, like pears and others. Jia was immensely grateful, bowing profusely while boldly asking Takuto to bestow these gifts on the children and the weakest in the group. Later, Jia returned with loads of food like fruits and nuts and distributed them to the villagers. The food problem being solved, the Dark Elves rejoiced. The elder Muatar was skeptical that these gifts were given so easily. Jia remained silent as this was the only way he saw to save everyone. Atu couldn't understand why Takuto would waste his mana like that. Takuto didn't see it as a problem as he genuinely sympathized with their plight. Atu was still annoyed at Takuto for wasting mana. Takuto, out of compassion, had generously given them items without much thought. However, he also took note of Atu's opinion and reminded himself to use mana more judiciously. Takuto admitted he hadn't performed very well the previous day. Atu disagreed, seeing Takuto as a strong, silent king in front of the Dark Elves. She was about to continue but was startled as Takuto broke down, believing he had a severe communication disorder. Atu quickly consoled Takuto, telling him a king doesn't need to speak much but should talk more with those he trusts. Moreover, any problem in the game could be solved if Takuto had wealth and strength. The bug returned with news: the Dark Elf witches were on their way to Takuto. Takuto thought the Dark Elves were coming to take the remaining items and planned to ask them to leave the forest after the matter was settled. However, he was unsure how to proceed as he was not good at communication and negotiation. Atu understood Takuto's worry and had come up with a good plan, so she took charge of the situation. The Dark Elves arrived, this time with the elder Muatar. Muatar spoke up, expressing gratitude for what Takuto had done for them. As Atu had predicted, Muatar, besides thanking, had something else to say. Hearing about the children in the group being rude, Muatar, as a leader, wanted to apologize to Takuto. Muatar also boldly asked for Takuto's name. Atu looked at Takuo, whose face showed confusion. Assertively, Atu announced the name of Takuto, the ruler of the wasteland, the king of the apocalypse, and reminded the Dark Elves to remember this grand and noble name. Muatar swore to Takuto that the Dark Elf tribe would forever remember his name and his boundless benevolence towards them. Muatar still wanted to know how he could repay Takuto, even though he couldn't think of anything that would satisfy him. Atu did not want to take anything from the Dark Elves, which made both parties uncomfortable. Takuto didn't want things to become too tense, understanding that the Dark Elves were seeking a mutually beneficial agreement. They had been fed and given a safe place to rest, so they didn't want to just leave. Moreover, Takuto's connection to demons made the Dark Elves suspicious of him and Atu. After some discussion, Atu declared they would accept tributes from the Dark Elves so they could be assured of receiving Takuto's favors. Takuto's condition was information about the outside world. Muatar agreed to this condition. Takuto had two reasons for not wanting the Dark Elf group to stay in the forest. First, their race belonged to a different faction, and if the current world was like the Eternal Kingdom, different civilizations and ideologies could lead to conflict. Secondly, even though the Dark Elves were neutrally aligned, Minogra was a demonic kingdom, and the land would be cursed, making it unsuitable for them. Takuto felt it was inconvenient for the Dark Elves to be there, as it would hinder his efforts to build a kingdom using the forest as a base. Muatar expressed a desire to live in the forest but was promptly dismissed by Atu. Takuto, sympathetic to the plight of the Dark Elves, asked if they wanted to become his citizens. Not only were the Dark Elves surprised, but so was Atu. The Dark Elves were wary, curious about what would happen if they became citizens of Takuto's kingdom. Atu assured them that they would live eternally, hinting at a happy life ahead. 2 days later, Takuto and Atu visited the Dark Elves' camp to welcome them as new residents of the kingdom. The citizenship ceremony into Minogra was conducted by Atu. The Dark Elves below paid close attention to the oath and the well-wishes that King Takuto extended to them. Jia suddenly felt overwhelmed with hatred, as painful memories of those who tortured and persecuted innocent people flooded his subconscious. These tormentors mocked and treated the people like trash. The curses of these wicked people echoed in Jia's head, only to be interrupted by Takuto's gentle and caring voice. Jia now understood what it meant to be protected, tears welling up in his eyes. All the Dark Elves chanted Takuto's name, truly expressing their respect for this great person. A few days after the ceremony, Takuto spent time reading and studying historical documents. After pondering, he realized a problematic issue: the two most powerful empires on this continent were both fanatically good aligned. One was a human kingdom worshipping a saint, the other an elven kingdom venerating Mother Nature, and Takuto's kingdom could potentially go under. Takuto felt fortunate to have information from Elder Muatar, but he hadn't expected a nation diametrically opposed to Minogra to be so overwhelmingly powerful. However, the real disaster was that this forest's production level was around zero, with no food, minerals, or even mana. In theory, even without scientific progress, players should be able to gather available food and minerals from their environment for development. But this forest offered nothing to harvest or hunt, indicating the game's high difficulty level. Elder Muatar, Jia, and a girl named Emuru came to explain more about this world to Takuto. Emuru, Jia's disciple, was responsible for international relations research in the Dark Elf tribe due to her extensive knowledge of various nations and their customs. Jia's dedication pleased Takuto and Atu. Before the meeting, Atu announced the future plan. Everyone present was now a key part of the political machinery. Elder Muatar would largely manage the nation with his magical abilities. Captain Jia would continue leading the kingdom's warriors. Muatar and Jia obeyed the orders, but Jia was somewhat puzzled why a demonic king would advocate for peace. He had thought he could seek revenge for past injustices. Muatar winked at Jia, as if they shared an unspoken intention. Takuto wanted to exploit the terrain but with the condition of not destroying the forest, aligning with Moiter's desire to live amidst nature. All three Dark Elves were still quite unclear about the concept of forest cultivation, with Jia thinking it was some kind of magic. Elder Muatar only knew about the 4 elements, the basis of the magic he used. Emuru added that she had only used magic to support warriors and had not heard of the military magic that Atu mentioned. Takuto also realized that the level of magic in this world was relatively primitive, so there was a need to accelerate development to gain an advantage. Atu explained forest cultivation, using magic to promote growth. Atu continued to speak highly of Takuto's extraordinary abilities, even if they weren't entirely real. Takuto tried to summon a coin quickly, and it actually appeared. Takuto and Atu now had a perfect plan to win this game by exploiting a loophole. The continent of Idaragia was divided by 2 mountain ranges into North and South continents. The southern continent was the Dark Continent, and the northern continent, the Orthodox Continent, was ruled by the human Holy Kingdom of Qualia and the Elven Alliance LNAR. These two nations had a good relationship, one of the key factors being the ultimate weapon known as the Holy Maiden. In the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, at the extreme north, the people suffered terribly from attacks by fearsome monsters. They came to seek the protection of the Holy Maiden Soalina to save their homeland. Soalina was an exceedingly graceful and straightforward saint in making judgments. Hearing the cries of the innocent and the pleas for peace from God, she inflicted the punishment of fiery burial upon those who dared to disturb the order of Quelia and defy the holy god Arlos. In an instant, all the evildoers were consumed by flames. Soalina ordered the cardinal and soldiers to investigate signs of disaster in the cursed lands. The cardinal was stunned by Soalina's decisiveness. Mobilizing the holy knights required official requests to the government, not arbitrary calls, and the cardinal suggested that Soalina might not fully comprehend her importance. Not understanding Soalina's thoughts but with her indifferent attitude, he begrudgingly followed her orders. Meanwhile, in the cursed lands of Minogra, all the dark elves were working diligently towards a significant goal. Takuto was no longer wearing patient clothes, he had changed into attire befitting a king. Furthermore, Takuto confidently took his place on his own throne. A few weeks after the establishment of the kingdom of Minogra, Takuto had already gathered a certain amount of mana from his citizens. He was confident in his abilities to lead everyone to happiness. Atu discussed with Molter about food production, an essential matter for daily life. Atu tasked Molter with experimenting with growing and caring for carnivorous plants, a type of plant that bears fruit tasting like human flesh. The first issue seemed to have a strategy in place. Moving to the second issue, research plans. Accessing good technology was crucial as it would boost the power of a nation. The first type of magic they chose to research was military magic. The third issue was the military plan. Takuto would personally create a hero. According to Atu, a hero is a citizen of the king with great power, all of them flawed monsters that grow stronger over time. Molter, not doubting but still unclear about the power of a hero, boldly asked Atu about this truth. Atu displayed her strength, leaving all the dark elves in awe. What grew from behind Atu looked terrifyingly long and capable of destroying any obstacle. All subsequent tasks were handed over to the dark elves to handle. A month later, the territory that once appeared lifeless had transformed into a kingdom. There were houses built on trees for research facilities, food storage areas, farmlands, collection sites, and extra plots for future plans. Emuru even found a spring to begin planning for well digging. Thus, the three main issues Takuto focused on developing, infrastructure, research, and military, were progressing smoothly. Takuto was also delighted as the physical and mental health of the citizens had improved significantly, a proud achievement for him. Takuto also took responsibility for essential activities as there was not yet an abundance of manpower. Takuto's idea of a flying castle once again amazed Molter and Emuru, who admired his knowledge and understanding. In the Holy Kingdom of Quelia, there was a religious position called the Holy Knight. These valiant warriors, skilled in both arts and arms, could perform feats second only to the saints. These individuals always had the support and trust of the people and were present everywhere to serve the country's needs. The day before, an expedition was sent to investigate the dangers of the cursed land after hearing the word of God from the holy maiden Soalina. Due to the urgency and lack of forces, Wordle, a high-ranking holy knight, had to join. Originally, there was only Lornias, a lower-ranked holy knight, and his team. Due to the inability to mobilize the kingdom's army, he had to hire some mercenaries for support. This showed Quelia's current limitations. Wordle's attitude was not serious at all, as he lacked moral character. Holy Maiden Soalina only had authority in the northern province, but the cursed land was in the south, meaning the mobilization of soldiers was the responsibility of the southern government. Although caution was needed on the Dark Continent, Wordle didn't think so. However, the injustice was that if the reconnaissance mission succeeded, only Wordle would gain glory, but if it failed, all blame would fall on Lornias, a lower-ranked holy knight without noble lineage for support. Bargot, the leader of the mercenaries, felt the path ahead was fraught with challenges and doubted the significance of their large reward, given the mediocre capabilities of mercenaries like him. Bargot's mention of a witch piqued Lornias's curiosity. In the Minogra territory, the carnivorous plants had been successfully cultivated, providing a stable food source. Moreover, the management of facilities was going smoothly, yielding results beyond expectations just a few months after the last inspection. The mystical atmosphere of the forest was evidence of Minogra's territory, now a cursed land. Residents living within the territory could feel this unusual influence. Atu was still pondering one issue: the territory was still too conspicuous. In the evening, the army group chose to rest at a tavern in town. Wordle, disregarding the image of a holy knight, indulged in drinking. Lornias quietly contemplated the challenges the soldiers might face as they approached the Dark Continent: monsters, poisoned land, or strange diseases. It required heightened vigilance. Wordle and Bargot discussed a witch causing chaos in the northern province. The soldiers now worried that a disaster comparable to the northern chaos was lurking deep within the cursed world. Wordle believed that the dark elves hiding in the cursed world were causing trouble and wanted to investigate this. He added that the Dark Elves were masters of assassination and cursing, with rumors of them practicing heresy and possibly harboring a witch. Wordle knew Molter and Gia from a previous encounter and cautioned Bargot and Lornias not to act rashly but to retreat immediately if necessary. Wordle was usually rude, but when Lornias wanted to attack evil, Wordle gave a speech to awaken the young man, to view the situation comprehensively to avoid terrible mistakes. The next day, the army encountered a hill giant, a monstrous creature of the Dark Continent that required at least a full army to defeat. Wordle volunteered to deal with this monster. Wordle's army reached the cursed world, a forest devoid of any signs of life. Bargot suggested investigating around the forest first, but Lornias disagreed, pointing out that the cursed world was vast and they didn't have enough time or manpower to survey it entirely. Lornias believed their current task was to look for any unusual changes in the forest, such as conducting a small survey. Wordle heard a strange noise and signaled the army to stay silent and still. From the dense forest emerged a girl dressed entirely in black, with her face obscured. Lornias thought she might be one of the dark elves Wordle had mentioned. Indeed, the girl confirmed she was one of the dark elves who had fled to the forest and asked Lornias's purpose for being there. Wordle refused to answer. The girl said she was driven from her home and had nowhere else to go, so she settled in the forest despite its cursed nature. Wordle also confirmed his army was holy knights from Qualia, there to carry out a task. The girl flatly rejected Wordle's proposal, as the people of her tribe were fearful of strangers. Wordle explained that it was due to the nature of their job. He also suspected something hidden in the forest was the reason for her adamant refusal. The girl questioned Wordle's intention to disturb such a gloomy forest. Wordle revealed they had received a prophecy of disaster in this land, so they couldn't return empty-handed. Lornias was shocked that Wordle would divulge such a secret of the Holy Kingdom to suspected heretics, a sin that could be severely punished. The girl calmly replied that no one here had the power to cause such disasters, they were all striving to live peacefully together. Wordle turned to withdraw after the girl swore to God that what she said was true. Lornias was astonished as he felt an unusual aura emanating from the girl, guessing she was an evil creature and they couldn't just return like this. Wordle didn't care, as he was certain nothing unusual was happening. Lornias, however, was the commander and immediately overruled Wordle, ordering Bargot to capture the girl for interrogation in the royal capital. At that moment, the girl removed her black attire, revealing that the person in the black clothes was none other than Atu. When Bargot and his soldiers charged forward, they were immediately impaled by Atu's long, sharp tentacles and killed. Wordle and Lornias ordered their soldiers to fire arrows, but Atu easily deflected them all. Wordle no longer hid anything about the witch, revealing that the Holy Maiden's prophecy was about a monster considered a disaster by the kingdom. The chaos in the north was caused by lone witches, and they had only confirmed 2 so far, with Atu appearing to be the third. Wordle swung his sword, and although his blade cut off one of Atu's tentacles, she still defended well. Wordle's sword came down again, grazing Atu's face and causing her pain. Furious, Atu's remaining tentacles constricted the remaining knights in the group. Lornias tried to remain calm until Wordle was attacked and died on the spot. The soldiers, witnessing this scene, were terrified and fled to preserve their lives, intending to return to the capital with the news. Atu didn't let the disruptors escape easily, her tentacles swiftly pursued them. Lornias, praying for divine strength to vanquish evil, charged at Atu with his sword. In her hand, Atu wielded Wordle's sword, blocking Lornias's attacks and fiercely retaliating. Atu had gained Wordle's swordsmanship skills at the moment she killed him. Lornias was bewildered. Atu praised Wordle as a brave and capable warrior, noble in both name and nature. She mockingly stated that someone as excellent as Wordle had to die because of Lornias's foolishness. Suddenly, Atu mentioned Lornias's wife and daughter, making him realize she wasn't lying. She had taken not only the skills but also the thoughts and memories of those she killed. Atu let Lornias hear Wordle's thoughts. Wordle worried about what would happen to Lornias if he died, as he had a family, and Wordle was also concerned about the other soldiers. Lornias, refusing to believe what he heard, regretted thinking Wordle was thoughtless. Trembling, Lornias still believed the fleeing soldiers would inform the kingdom to send holy troops. Barget's head rolling to Lornias's feet shocked him. The Dark Elves had annihilated all the fleeing soldiers, leaving no one to escape. Ignoring everything, Lornias brandished his sharp sword and charged at Atu. His fate was to be ensnared by Atu's tentacles and hung upside down. Lornias could have chosen a better ending, returning home to his wife and children, praying to God, and being with his family. Atu would have also lived peacefully. But Lornias's stubbornness led him to a foolish decision. His loved ones and all that mattered to him would also be decimated by Atu. Atu then killed Lornias. Gia wondered if Atu would really do what she had just said, but Atu, who would not harm the innocent, would not actually do it. When killing the soldiers, Atu also heard about the witch and quickly returned to the forest to report to Tekuto. Witches had never been mentioned in the Eternal Kingdom, but according to Atu, this world was not a game. The existence of nations, the Holy Maiden, and the legends about the world that Atu heard from Maltra and Imuru had never appeared in the game, so the mechanics here were entirely different. Based on Wordle's memories, Atu saw that the two good-aligned nations had not engaged in major military conflicts in recent decades. Tekuto felt a headache as everything was quite complicated. Currently, the riot in the northern province of Qualia was what Tekuto needed to focus on, as the Holy Maiden's prophecy had led to this investigation. Tekuto sensed that the witch had power equivalent to a hero, so he needed to take different actions, such as establishing alliances. Meanwhile, Holy Maiden Soelina was investigating every move of the witch Arikino. Due to the appearance of Holy Maiden Kaufus, the witch had not made any moves yet. The news also mentioned that 2 cities in the northern province were destroyed, with severe losses of life and property at the hands of the witch. In the LNAR Elf Alliance, a tense meeting of the Four-Headed Council was taking place. The leaders of the council each had different opinions. Some argued that Qualia, still struggling with the witch in the north, needed assistance, while others called for sending holy maidens and skilled warriors for a swift resolution. In the dark continent of Fankavan, a nation of half-humans and spirits was under attack by some force. Back in the Cursed World, at the construction site of Minogra Palace, Atu was inspecting the progress of the building. Emuru and the Dark Elves had unanimously decided to build Tekuto's palace first and then construct their own houses. Atu returned to Tekuto, expressing her regret for killing the soldiers, which might affect Tekuto. Tekuto was not overly concerned and reassured Atu to make her feel more comfortable. Atu resolved to ensure that Tekuto's vision of a wicked nation with peace and tranquility was fulfilled. Finally, Tekuto's palace, named Minogra Palace, was completed after a long construction period. Its architecture, bizarre and angular, was surrounded by ancient tree roots. After eliminating the investigation team, Minogra was gradually regaining its inherent strength. Military magic, which required mana of a particular attribute, was also being researched, allowing for the expansion of Minogra. Atu suddenly realized an important issue, the shortage of manpower, as a king like Tekuto had no attendants. To Atu, this was a matter of national spirit. Tekuto was the only one who could ensure the country's development and people's faith, so he needed to be dignified. Another concern from Atu was the inconvenience of having only 2 people in such a vast palace. Tekuto's communication disorder flared up, hindering his desire to be a friendly king. He felt terrible for not being able to comfortably converse with Molter and Gia. Ato came up with an ingenious idea to help Takuto achieve his wish. Her little girl plan was to have young girls talk to Takuto, making it easier for him to communicate despite his disorder. Molter, Gia, and Imuru misunderstood this as Takuto wanting to personally train future subordinates. Takuto was caught between laughter and tears and let them interpret things their way, but he also planned to use this opportunity to treat his communication disorder. However, things weren't as simple as imagined because any dark elf, especially children, would scream and cry upon meeting Takuto. Any future meetings would likely be tearful. From the dark elf's perspective, Takuto didn't appear human but as a dark, ominous shadow. Molter mentioned a pair of twins in the tribe, intelligent but orphaned, who he thought wouldn't be suitable to serve the king. Ato still wanted to meet them before deciding. Gia brought the twins to meet Takuto. The younger sibling, Kari Elfu, with a quiet demeanor and scars covering half her body, and her older sister, Marie Elfu, who appeared more feminine and beautiful. The children didn't cry upon meeting Takuto, passing the first test. Kari's half-body scarring, a result of necrosis from a disease, caught Ato's attention. The scar remained even though the wound had healed. The Dark Elves had gone through difficult times, driven to cannibalism out of starvation. Marie too had survived by eating her own mother's flesh. Marie naturally approached Takuto to chat without any fear. Ato internally rejoiced as Takuto was able to converse normally with the girl. The twins thus became Takuto's attendants. In the following days, Takuto was somewhat annoyed as Marie worked carelessly, leaving messes for Kari to fix. Takuto understood the conflict within these children. Their mother had sacrificed herself out of love, but this life gained from their mother had become a deep-seated guilt in their memories, making them want to punish themselves for it. Takuto explained to the children that they hadn't done anything wrong and should live comfortably. Ato returned with a map. Based on her analysis, she guessed that the town of Dragontan in the neutral country of Phonicaven was located on a dragon vein, a source of mana. Phonkavan, a multi-ethnic neutral nation, primarily populated by humans, believed in spirit beings inhabiting animals, plants, and the earth. Despite being multi-ethnic, there were no conflicts. They lived peacefully in the countryside without wars. However, currently in the capital Crescent Moon, they were forced to fight against a half-human race called the Man Tribe. People armed themselves with whatever they could find to battle a hill giant. This wasn't the first time such a crazy incident occurred. Last week, the townspeople had to fight 3 giants, not to mention goblins and orcs. The hill giant was targeting a damaged earth statue at the town's edge, and if it entered the town, everything would be over. All attempts to stop the giant resulted in the soldiers being brutally crushed. Most of the army was exhausted, with hundreds of casualties. If the situation continued, not only the town but also their entire kingdom would be destroyed. The staff holder, Pepe, used forest magic to create ropes that tripped the hill giant. The people hailed Pepe as the priestess. In less than 5 minutes, the giant stood up but was quickly tied to a rock. Then, the village elder Tanyakapali appeared, ordering his men to shoot the giant's eyes to finish it off. After resolving the situation, the elders returned to the temple in the village. Pepe, despite being the heir to the statue keeper and able to hear the spirit ancestors' guidance, behaved foolishly. Elder Tanyakapali was frustrated, as despite his efforts to teach her, Pepe still had gaps in her thinking. An elder spoke up, requesting Tanakapali and Pepe to go to the town of Dragontan and also made a small request related to investigating the recent chaos based on the prophecy of disaster in the cursed world. Tanyakapali understood the importance of the dragon veins and knew that mana truly existed in the world. He hoped that once the kingdom's strategic magic was complete, it would help refine mana to enhance the kingdom's power. A week later, on their way to the cursed world, Tanyakapali's army, including beastmen, encountered Atu and the Dark Elves. The atmosphere was tense until Pepe greeted them. It's unclear how the conversation started, but both parties were able to walk side by side and talk naturally. Pepe excitedly described to Atu how she held off the hill giant. Finally, Tanya Kappali met Takuto. From her perspective, like the dark elves, Takuto appeared as a dark shadow. Pepe, undeterred by the intimidating atmosphere and contrary to Tanya Kappali's caution, approached Takuto to ask for friendship. Tanya Kappali was shocked, but even more so when Takuto agreed to befriend Pepe. Pepe's status showed up as a leader. Her naivete, lack of discrimination, and fearlessness allowed her to easily make friends with everyone. That evening, a grand feast was held in Manogra territory. Everyone enjoyed delicious food, conversation, and laughter. Pepe, excited, got up to dance, making everyone else feel awkward. Despite their different ideals, principles, and races, they all shared the same view at the dinner table. The party lasted until midnight, and after it ended, Takuto personally saw off the beast men. The next day, a meeting was held to govern the Manogra territory. Atu praised the contributions and hard work of the Dark Elves, which had helped build a close relationship with Fonkavan. Takuto was very pleased and openly commended them. Atu admitted feeling a chill when they first encountered Fonkavan's army, fearing a repeat of the incident with the Holy Knights. Jia reported that the Holy Kingdom of Qualia remained inactive, and as he predicted, the people were still panicked over the chaos in the northern province. Atu instructed them to focus on strengthening the kingdom. Concluding the meeting, Atu announced that Manogra and Fonkavan had reached a favorable agreement, with Manogra successfully accessing the Dragon Vein. The investigation into whether Dragontan was really attacked or the origins of the Man tribe needed to continue. Atu thought to herself that by killing more units, she could increase her power, and if she attacked at the right moment, she could annihilate the entire Man tribe. The atmosphere suddenly became silent when Imuru, the secretary, invited opinions on establishing diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and reviewing defense treaties. Carrie suddenly wondered what kind of country Fonkavan was. This question awakened all the adults present. Molter spoke first, acknowledging that although some information had been gathered and presented to Takuto, they still did not have a clear understanding of Fonkavan's detailed situation. The information Manogra had previously obtained only showed the surface of the matter, but in terms of diplomacy, it was necessary to know the opponent's overall value and the boundaries between the rich and poor classes. Takuto started to feel uneasy because the internal information of Fonkavan was not available on the status board. The most urgent issue was to investigate Fonkavan first, but this would delay the support for Dragontan. Amidst the confusion, with every option carrying risks, Marie suggested visiting Fonkavan. The twins, eager to help, begged Takuto for permission to go. Takuto had no choice but to agree. Atu felt heartbroken for the first time by being outdone by two children. She was shocked that Takuto had been moved by another girl, not her. Molter wanted to confirm with Takuto whether they should trust Pepe. Despite Takuto's doubts about whether Imuru's naive emotions were genuine, he chose to optimistically believe that everything would be fine. Takuto, Atu, and the twins went to a clinic where the military doctors looked quite intimidating. Takuto named the three of them Ikuru, Jairu, Saburo, and appointed them as guardians for the twins on their visit to Fonkavan. Imuru, more excited than anyone, took the trouble to make 2 sets of clothes for the twins to wear on their visit. Atu was also very satisfied, seeing the children exuding positive energy. Takuto, using telepathy with Carrie, reminded her to contact him telepathically in case of any problems. Thus, the twins, along with their 3 noisy guardians, set off to inspect Dragontan. Atu and Takuto felt a bit worried, wondering if this group would achieve anything significant or just cause trouble. In the multicultural city of Fonkavan, inside the town hall, there were exhausted sighs. The city's mayor, Antelai's Antique, looked worn out with dark circles under her eyes and disheveled hair. Her desk was piled high with documents awaiting her attention. Antelai's, so exhausted that she resorted to alcohol for alertness but to no avail, felt incredibly irritated. She had planned a perfect day off in the forest, but the arrival of foreigners forced her to deal with them instead. Antelai screamed at the stacks of paperwork, which showed no sign of decreasing. The night before, news had come from the higher-ups about a cooperation with Ruin, the country ruled by the demon lord Manogra, Takuto. The thought infuriated Antelise even more. She had no desire to collaborate with the dark forces to stop the foreign tribes. Exhausted but not wanting to meet anyone, Antelise hastily prepared herself upon hearing the visitors were from Minogra. The twins and their 3 guardians were arranged in a guest room, their ominous presence frightening even Antelise. Carrie spoke up, introducing themselves. Antelise maintained a gentle smile but was internally filled with questions about the twins' identities. She remembered Tanya Capelli mentioning these personally taught sisters, feeling panicked about how to continue the conversation without proper preparation. Antelise couldn't understand why these guests didn't go directly to the capital but stopped at her remote location. Jairu broke the tension, getting straight to the point that their visit was based on Pepe's word, to visit and see how people in another country live, just like harmless passers-by. Antelise felt a weight lifted off her chest, relieved that the visitors were there for sightseeing, not for any serious negotiations or talks. With her worries eased, Antelise became more relaxed in conversation and even offered to arrange accommodation for them. She then took the distinguished guests on a tour of the city. Carrie inquired about the main food source in the city. Antelise thought for a few seconds before answering that being an isolated region, it was very different from the northern territories, making food production difficult. However, they still had small harvests, so the people mainly ate wheat, rice, and various grains. Antelise enthusiastically introduced a special type of cacti cheese. After the city tour, the twins said goodbye to Antelise and returned to the inn to rest. At the inn, Carrie and Marie reviewed what they had observed that day. Marie sensed fear among the local people. The 3 guardians felt the city's atmosphere was peculiar and that racial discrimination might be affecting the community. Marie showed the poppy plant they had bought on the street, which induced a hallucinogenic, euphoric feeling. Its widespread cultivation suggested that all was not as peaceful as the twins and their guardians had initially thought. The next day, the group visited the area with the dragon vein. Antelise couldn't join due to a sudden meeting. Although the dragon vein was cleverly concealed with sand and soil, it wasn't much help. Carrie was curious about what lay beneath the crystal layer. The sisters reminisced about their mother and their bedtime conversations about the outside world. Carrie's eyes filled with tears, and she vowed to live well so that her mother could rest in peace. A man named Vesta appeared, who ran a company in the city. It turned out that Vesta owned the poppy shop they had visited the day before. Carrie was wary of this man. Vesta had a hidden agenda, handing Carrie an invitation to a meeting that evening. In the afternoon, the twins met Antelise again, and they ate and played together. Returning to the city's guest house, Antelise felt a pang of regret about soon parting with the 2 girls. Vesta's sudden appearance irritated her. Antelise had a bad premonition, wondering if the twins had made some agreement with Vesta's company Kirkrane, a criminal organization involved in smuggling, assassinations, and brawls. She worried that if this was true, the city wouldn't be able to handle them. Vesta pulled out a syringe containing a solution derived from opium, which would cause lifelong dependency in anyone injected with it. The guards outside had already been neutralized by Vesta, and his 2 henchmen were waiting to attack the twins. However, they made a grave mistake by targeting those under the protection of the Demon King. The Minogra military doctors, known as Brain Eaters, quickly eliminated Vesta's henchmen and then Vesta himself. Antelise, witnessing the entire ordeal, was shocked but couldn't help but laugh at the humorous antics of the quirky military doctors. Atu was busy preparing for a meeting, suffering from a headache since morning as she scheduled appointments with representatives from various towns to discuss plans. As she walked through the hall, she encountered the twins trying to hide the corpse they had dissected the day before. Atu was furious upon learning that the twins and the brain-eating group had dissected Vesta right in front of Mayor Antelise and then tried to cover it up by misusing the power of the Minogra kingdom. This was also Takuto's fault for allowing them to do so. Takuto didn't want the children to hate him for assigning them this task, but Atu didn't care. She had wanted to build a serious and well-intentioned image of the country, and these individuals had ruined it. The meeting's main focus now shifted to how to deal with the situation in Dragontan. According to the twins' observations, Dragontan was rotting from the inside, which Takuto also witnessed through his connection abilities. Emuru believed that everyone was too focused on the twins' investigation results and forgetting that a riot could soon break out in the city. Emuru's point was that Dragontan was in a more critical state than everyone thought. Ato also guessed that the people there were struggling, so the plan to attract immigrants to Minogra might soon be implemented. Minogra was ready to welcome dark elves from Fonkavan or people from Dragontan to build a strong population. The Brain Eaters reported information about the Man tribe, including goblins, orcs, and occasionally hill giants. The frequency of their attacks on Dragontan was consistently increasing with no signs of stopping. Takuto suggested Ato use her absorption skill to enhance her combat strength. For now, the issue of strength was left to Ato, while Takuto would handle defense but needed another person to stay behind to protect the people. Molter also wanted to join the battle, proposing that Captain Gia stay behind to support the people while he would take his magic research students into battle. Ato had already considered a plan for the defensive line, Isla the Bug Queen, one of Minogra's heroes. Takuto was finalizing the steps to complete this female warrior. Ato eagerly anticipated welcoming Isla, having invested a lot of resources in her creation. Takuto stood before a large stone podium, channeling all his strength and will to summon Isla. A whirlwind swirled around, and the sky flashed with lightning, heralding the imminent arrival of a formidable hero. The magic circle opened, and from within it stepped out a colossal bug queen, towering up to 100 feet. Isla respectfully bowed to Takuto, recalling their past conquests together in the game. Back at the palace, after hearing the full story, Isla affirmed her commitment to safeguarding the peace of the kingdom. However, Takuto's strategy still required more manpower, hence the need to increase troop numbers through reproductive skills. Ato was in tears, distressed that she had to go to battle, but for the king, there was nothing she wouldn't do. Takuto's daily life became problematic after Ato left Minogra. He often slept late into the afternoon, and after taking care of his personal hygiene and eating, he would go back to sleep, repeating this routine for a week. Emuru sought Isla's help as Gia kept damaging equipment, exceeding the budget. Isla, wanting to assist Takuto, asked the twins to give her a tour to observe how people worked. Knowing Takuto's indulgence towards the girls, she wanted to see how they would behave and solve problems working with her. Isla also toured the magical research room. At the warrior training facility, Gia was terrified when Isla inquired about the maintenance of the combat equipment. Just a single command from Isla made a fiery captain like Gia immediately comply. Isla was also taken by the twins to visit various other areas to better understand the country's situation. She resolved to focus on training high-quality labor, as only then could the nation develop. It was mealtime, and Marie was extremely excited, forgetting that she was still showing Isla around. The communal dining area was spacious, with tables and chairs arranged for everyone to gather. Marie quickly grabbed 4 or 5 plates full of food. As a hero, Isla understood her responsibility to protect her people, and the first step was to gain their trust. A responsible individual, she declared that the twins deserved protection, and she swore to defend them with her life. Everyone was touched by this scene, surprised by Isla's warmth. The twins, especially Marie, felt loved as if by a mother as Isla patted their heads. Isla mentioned Emuru's proposal to build a school with Takuto. Takuto also mentioned that Isla needed to undergo the reproductive process to increase manpower. Isla incessantly praised the twins for their contributions, which helped her to develop fresher ideas. With the tasks handed over to Isla, Takuto felt somewhat relieved. Meanwhile, Ato was engaged in a fierce battle. She was fearless and had no intention of letting anyone who dared stand in her way off the hook. Mayor Antelis was in shock after shock, witnessing each vandal being eliminated by Ato. But in reality, this was just Ato stretching her muscles, not a real battle. During her rest, Ato found it amusing to be compared to an octopus with many legs by Pepe. She had recently acquired several skills, the agility of a goblin, the strength of an orc, the regenerative ability of hill giants, and she was eyeing the stone-hardening skill of a stone golem. No sooner had Atu rested than a hill giant appeared. Antelise worried for Atu, fearing it was too dangerous for her to face the monster alone without fully recovering. Without waiting for Antelise to finish, Atu charged at the beast with her sword, piercing it straight from head to toe, killing it instantly. Molter also used dark magic to turn a certain area into lunar land, causing the beast to suffer damage. Atu was contemplating whether to deal with the hill giant's corpse when it suddenly vanished, leaving behind a coin. Molter examined the coin, never having seen such a gold coin on this continent. Atu pondered, the hill giant died, its body disappeared, and a coin, seemingly from another place, appeared. At the city gates, there was a loud announcement about the appearance of monsters, this time in the hundreds to thousands. Takuto observed the situation through the eyes of a scouting bug, puzzled by the large number of monsters. According to Atu's report, the army of monsters was 10 times larger than usual, possibly reaching a strength level of 10,000. Atu informed Takuto about the item dropped from the hill giant's corpse, guessing it belonged to a different civilization. Seeing the gold coin with a sun on both sides, Takuto recalled having seen it before. He feared that not only them, but another faction not from the reincarnation world, was involved. Takuto continued to entrust Atu with the protection of the city, believing that the enemy was not playing a strategic game, but something worse, an RPG. In a different place, amidst a desolate and deadly landscape, the Saintess Soalina looked up at the sky, deep in thought. Arikino appeared, humming a song of death. She was annoyed by Soalina's consistently cold demeanor, making normal conversation impossible. Suddenly, the dead bodies revived at Arikino's command, shambling toward Soalina with intent to attack. Soalina glided through the zombies, stabbing Arikino with a knife and killing her instantly. Soalina surveyed her surroundings, blaming herself for not being able to save everyone. At the training session led by Captain Gia, every warrior was drenched in sweat, indicating the seriousness of the day's training. Before dismissing his troops, Gia repeatedly checked to ensure no equipment was damaged. Returning to his rest area, Gia overheard a conversation, the voices of the twins and Isla. The twins seemed to be recounting their painful past, driven out of their homeland and later sheltered by Takuto. Isla wondered if the exiled Dark Stars and the two children were involved in the conflicts. Carrie revealed her ability to see through people's hearts. No matter how much people hid, the twins could always discern their true nature. This ability was deemed dangerous by other races, leading to their exile. Gia reminisced about a difficult time when Carrie and Marie's mother begged him and the village elder Molter to sacrifice herself to save the villagers and her daughters. Molter and Gia, with heavy hearts, had no other choice. Since then, the once lively and active Marie became withdrawn, while Carrie started harming herself as a form of punishment. Now, with Isla, the children could finally relax, be loved, and heal. Takuto and Isla were in a secret meeting. The force Takuto referred to was not from a strategic game, but from an RPG, which was unexpected. Isla considered the possibility that they might be like Takuto's team, possibly from a different kingdom but within the same game. Takuto agreed, as the Eternal Nations gaming system also incorporated other games, so there were no issues with other countries. This meant that another game was joining this world. Takuto had previously made several plans, but this development was unforeseen. He contacted Atu, wanting to provide her with more information about this game. The approaching monsters were from Brave Questers, a classic game considered the origin of all computer RPGs, where the protagonist and his friend live in a vast, magical world. Players command units turn by turn to save the world from a vile monster. The game focuses on storytelling and is designed for players to follow the protagonist's life, offering countless ways to build characters through stats and statuses. It even has scenes that establish its own world and characters. Here, the good side isn't the only one with a storyline, there are evil sides and formidable rivals too. In a desolate, deadly land, the demon lord of both ice and fire extremes was negotiating. The fire demon lord couldn't understand why the monsters here were coexisting with humans. He was confident as the goblins and orcs had allied with him, everything was perfectly arranged, and it was just a matter of time before they took over this world. He was thrilled recalling a battle where they destroyed an unnamed kingdom in one night. The Ice Commander ordered his subordinates to summon the monsters from the abyss, intending to offer the city to the Demon King. The Ice Commander led the army, while the Fire Demon Lord had his reasons for conquering another town on his own. In Dragontan, soldiers were desperately resisting the monster attack. Mayor Antelis was extremely stressed, trying to both mobilize troops for reinforcement and evacuate civilians to the northwest. Observing the situation, Antelis was heartbroken. Dozens of hill giants with terrifying strength, along with goblins and orcs, were attacking relentlessly. The army had no time to rest or adjust their battle strategy. Dragonstan was on the verge of collapse. Antelis attempted to summon magical power to call upon guiding spirits for direction. A goblin charged at Antelis while she was physically drained, but fortunately, Minogra's scout bird timely intervened. Molter, as a close aide of Takuto and a citizen of Minogra, led the soldiers into battle to protect and cover the people of Minogra. The long-legged bugs, also known as scouts, were assigned to support the Dragontan troops, and Molter weakened the enemy's capabilities. Antelis was astounded by Molter's magic. It was then that Antelis remembered Atu, and Molter calmly stated that Atu was single-handedly hunting down the commander of these savages. Molter reassured Antelis not to worry, as Minogra's heroic general would never fail. Antelis could feel the atmosphere getting heavier, the ground starting to rot, wondering if this was Minogra's attack beginning. Meanwhile, Atu had reached the area of the Ice Commander, ready to fight with utmost confidence. Atu, representing the RPG, faced the Ice Commander Heavenly Kings, representing the strategy game. Heavenly King's subordinates, intimidated by Atu the Mud Witch's aura, cautioned their master to be careful. The Ice Commander, undervaluing Atu, boasted of his status as one of the 4 Heavenly Kings, determined to crush the woman before him with his own hands. Atu smirked coldly, drawing her sword. She moved swiftly, dodging all the ice bullets from Heavenly Kings. No matter how many ice bullets he fired, Atu blocked them all. Frustrated and grinding his teeth, Heavenly Kings desperately wanted to defeat his opponent. Atu had somewhat grasped his fighting style, focusing on offense rather than defense. Seizing the opportunity while Atu was off guard, Heavenly King's subordinates prepared to grab her. Atu planted her sword into the ground and flipped over, unleashing long tentacles to obliterate those who dared approach her. In less than a minute, those tentacles had mutilated Heavenly King's subordinates, limbs severed, faces disfigured, blood spraying. The scene was horrific. Heavenly Kings could only gape as the body parts of his subordinates fell. Then, Atu drove her tentacles into the ground, leveraged herself up high, and with a firm grip on her sword, struck down at her opponent. Heavenly Kings quickly raised his axe to block Atu's sword. Realizing Atu's strategy to divide his forces, he wondered how he could defend himself. He knew his army mainly comprised low-level demons. Without a leader to bind them, such an army would disintegrate like a horde of dead rats, and his forces were rapidly being annihilated. Takuto correctly predicted that although Brave Questers had many versions, they all shared a common game mechanic, engagement range. If 100 enemies appeared, only 3 that appeared on the screen could be attacked. Similarly, those not on the screen couldn't attack Atu's forces. However, Eternal Nations, being a ground-based strategic game, allowed for a single strike to reach all targets within range. Gradually, Atu wiped out the goblins and orcs, leaving Heavenly Kings in shock. He summoned ice spirits to advance quickly, but Atu once again swiftly eliminated the monsters. Heavenly Kings cursed, bewildered why Atu, also a demon, chose not to follow the Lord's will but to oppose them. Atu countered, asking him if, besides his ambition to dominate the world, he had any other aspirations. Immediately after speaking, she launched a sudden attack, having pre-planned to assess which category Heavenly Kings belonged to. It turned out he was just a muscle-brained type with a typical warrior style. In other words, this was an old version of the game, where the enemy had to fight according to the RPG system, but Atu played by strategic game rules. Ato quickly severed Heavenly King's arm. Heavenly Kings, refusing to be outdone, used his ice slash to cut down half of Ato's body. The fury in Ato reached its peak, her sharp tentacles simultaneously piercing Heavenly King's face, ripping him to death. The wound on Ato's shoulder couldn't fully heal because Heavenly Kings had used a special attack. When Ato contacted Takuto, she received bad news that the enemy had invaded Minogra. The guard of Minogra's domain swiftly ran to Takuto's palace to report that the enemy was approaching their borders. Takuto was already aware of this through the signals from the long-legged scout bugs and had anticipated this invasion. He was puzzled why the enemy decided to head straight for Minogra, having moved their forces towards Fonkavan in recent years, and perhaps now they wanted to attack simultaneously. Isla was worried, even though the dense forest wasn't on Takuto's side, the cursed land would still alert their troops of the enemy's presence, but at this moment, they couldn't mobilize the army. Takuto felt there was too little information to make a decision, especially with other games involved. In other words, he didn't want to overly rely on standard rules and norms but needed to consider carefully. Takuto hoped that the enemy's strengths and weaknesses would fall within his predictions so that if his side, being a strategic game, could take advantage of attacking multiple targets at once, their chances of victory would be higher. This action would be a significant turning point for Minogra's forces. Captain Jia and his warriors had completed evacuating non-combatants to the administrative building and were moving to defensive positions. The construction of walls was progressing well. Placing troops on certain terrains would provide bonuses for Takuto's forces, and he had deployed brain eaters in nearby areas to ensure civilians could return safely. Currently, Isla had nearly 200 bugs, mostly worker insects, but with her modifications, they might take down goblins or something similar. The current situation showed the enemy's forces growing stronger from the south, and the dragon warriors were being surrounded by Mandi, but Atul was ordered to block the enemy there at all costs. Takuto's fighting spirit was higher than ever. He granted Isla, the queen of insects, his current power, to upgrade and strengthen to the limit. He also gave her the skills of parasitic eggs and hunting. Isla's task was to use her newfound strength to protect the land and people of Minogra. Filled with a fighting spirit, she felt more alive than ever, seeing the protection of the people as a great honor. She instructed the twins to protect and assist Takuto before preparing to leave. This would be Isla's defining moment, ready to show the enemy the terrifying strength of the Queen of Insects. At the same time, deep in the forest, Veem Chief Knight Du Tai and Veem Chief Mage Motzi felt the dark energy growing increasingly heavy. Motzi thought that the Fire Demon Lord had discovered the Chosen One by something. A giant orge suddenly appeared, moving towards them, but its body grotesquely swelled with boils. The boils burst, releasing tiny bugs that swarmed the monsters, corroding their bodies. Knight Du Tai was furious, wanting to burn down the entire forest right from the start. Suddenly, 3 brain eaters appeared, scaring Motzi and Knight Du Tai into a frantic escape. Just when they thought they had escaped the human-skinned brain eaters, they encountered Isla. The 2 minions of the Fire Demon Lord stood no chance and were swiftly devoured by Isla. The Fire Demon Lord himself, also one of the 4 heavenly kings, known as Flamen, appeared. Now, Isla had officially declared war on Fire Demon Flamen. The decisive battle between the 2 forces began. Back in the domain of Minogra, Takuto was deep in thought. Marie and Carrie thought Takuto was worried about Isla, continuously comforting him. Takuto wasn't exactly worried about Isla, knowing her capabilities as the insect queen, but he had an ominous premonition about what was to come. The difference between the characters in the strategy game and the RPG, as shown in the first battle with Heavenly Kings, indicated Takuto's side had the advantage. The overall battle was still going smoothly. His concern was possibly the enemy's combat skills, but Takuto couldn't remember if Flamen had any special attacks. Isla had just declared war on Flamen, the Brain Eaters were always ready to assist, and the scouts had no new information, yet Takuto was uneasy, feeling like he was diving into the unknown. Returning to the forest battlefield, Isla was still comfortably fighting Flamen. She deployed her tiny bugs to distract him. Flamen wasn't easily overwhelmed, He used his fire power to incinerate anything attacking him and even the surrounding trees. The fire demon summoned reinforcements, fire wolves, fire hill giants, and even fire orgs to eliminate Isla's bugs. Isla had anticipated Flamen summoning auxiliary monsters like heavenly kings and was now facing them with her swarm of bugs. She felt the difficulty of her situation but did not falter. Isla's bugs swarmed Flamen's reinforcements, slowly draining their blood and corroding their bodies. The sight disgusted Flamen, who started to realize the dire situation and contemplated fleeing. Isla blocked Flamen's path, questioning why they attacked Dragontan and Minogra simultaneously and split their forces. Flamen, laughing maniacally, mocked Isla as a foolish and arrogant puppet who believed in her own faith. Isla suspected that the enemy held information unknown even to Takuto. Flamen summoned more reinforcements to attack Isla and launched fire bullets that burned off her arms. Remaining calm, Isla quickly regenerated her limbs. As Flamen prepared another attack, Isla created a gigantic egg sac that exploded, raining down on Flamen. The bugs falling on him caused great discomfort. Isla then flew towards him, using her sharp claws to shred the despicable fire demon. After the fight, Isla reported to Takuto that she had completed her mission and awaited her upgrade. As Takuto was about to praise Isla, a strange object fell in front of him. Suddenly, Isla lost contact with Takuto, and the twins unexpectedly appeared before her, leaving her baffled as they were supposed to be with Takuto. The sorcerer had turned into a demon during dark magic practice. A city of scholars was destroyed in a brutal assault, marking the rise of one of the 4 heavenly kings, destined to be defeated by a hero. The twins were confused and disoriented, having been in the palace with Takuto just a minute ago and now finding themselves in a dark, deadly forest. Isla quickly ordered her bugs to protect the twins. She tried to summon the long-legged bugs but received no response, suspecting the situation was similar to Atu's battle. Unable to reach Takuto, Isla reassured the twins. Behind Isla, where she had just killed Flamen, a sinister laughter erupted. She immediately turned back and plunged her legs into Flamen's face. Flamen continued to mock, reminding her that this world, filled with refuse, couldn't be saved, yet Isla still chose to live in it. Despite his body being torn apart by Isla, Flamen showed no signs of weakness in his final moments. Flamen declared that no matter what Isla guessed, the event he referred to was predestined, a mandatory occurrence that couldn't be altered. Isla suddenly noticed the twins moving towards Flamen. She tried to stop them, but they were moving involuntarily, driven by the predestined event Flamen mentioned. Isla felt a sense of dread and demanded Flamen stop, as the children were not part of the battle. Flamen insisted it was inevitable, regardless of Isla's efforts, as the puppets must follow their destined fate. He mocked Isla as a wretch living in a free world, finding it unfair and wanting her to face the same fate as him. Isla, unable to bear these constraints, rushed to the twins before they got closer to Flamen and embraced them. It was the best she could do at the moment. A massive explosion shook the forest, leaving only ashes and devastation. The twins were in shock, speechless, as Isla before them was destroyed, half her body obliterated. A flashback appeared, with the twins admiring the moon together. Marie recalled Takuto saying, "The moon is beautiful tonight," meaning, "I love you." Both girls found this meaningful and agreed to say the same phrase to Isla upon her return. Back in reality, they saw Isla severely wounded, blood continuously flowing from her body. Marie and Carrie screamed, unable to bear seeing their beloved one so gravely injured. In utter panic, the only thing they could think of was to contact Takuto to save Isla. Contrary to the twins' panic, Isla remained completely calm, seemingly accepting her fate with serenity. She took the children's hands and solemnly entrusted them with 2 important tasks. Marie and Carrie, sensing the unease, became agitated and burst into tears. Painful memories and fears resurfaced. They had lost their mother, been mistreated, and lived with guilt. Marie lamented why everyone close to them had to leave, blaming themselves for seeking too much happiness, wondering if it was a wicked wish. The heart-wrenching cries of the twins deeply pained Isla. She expressed how happy she was to have come to this world and met the children, cherishing every moment with them. She valued their affection and felt truly fortunate to receive such immense love. Concluding her words, Isla impaled herself with her claw and extracted the royal legacy. Once again, Marie and Carrie faced the harrowing choice of consuming a loved one to survive and become heroes. Isla was content with her sacrifice, knowing it would allow others to live. She understood the twins might despise the cruel reality of survival but still wished for their life. Meanwhile, Atul was fighting fiercely. Hearing that the invaders had breached their territory, she was eager to return. Takuto had previously ordered Isla to attack and eliminate the Demon King to quickly end the battle, anticipating he might have unused special skills. Despite understanding Takuto's reasons, Atul disagreed and was preparing to return when Takuto contacted her. His words left Atul in disbelief. Isla had fallen in battle. In the domain of the Wind Demon King, one of the 4 heavenly kings, the small figure of a girl caught her attention. It was Carrie, who, instead of responding to the Wind Demon King, burst into tears, questioning why no one loved her and why the world was so cruel. The Wind Demon King, sensing something unusual, ordered her subordinates to be on high alert. Suddenly, Carrie's tone changed, accusingly telling the Wind Demon King that she had a face favored by the world. The Wind Demon King, uninterested in the nonsensical talk, ordered her goblin and hill giant minions to quickly dispose of the annoying thorn. In the domain of the mechanic, the last of the 4 heavenly kings, Marie appeared in a joyfully contrasting state to Carrie. Her crisp laughter caught the attention of the mechanic's subordinates. He detected an attack and prepared to activate the defense system, but it malfunctioned due to an inability to pinpoint the attack coordinates. Marie simply had to open her mouth and mimic chewing for the nearby monster to lose half of its body. Her eyes gleaming and smile radiant, Marie moved along, declaring her need for love in a world that hated her. Wherever she went, repeating her previous action, more monsters lost their bodies. Back in the Wind Demon King's domain, she held her face in agony, half of it horrifically destroyed. Carrie continued to cry, lamenting the unfairness of life and her lack of love, unwilling to endure it alone. The Wind Demon King suspected magic but hadn't heard of such a spell before. Gradually, she realized Carrie was spreading her own suffering to anyone targeted. The Wind Demon King tried to flee in terror but didn't get far before her legs melted into a black, putrid sludge. Meanwhile, the mechanic was chasing Marie, who suddenly stopped. An unknown magic halted all functions of his mechanical being. Marie could even affect inanimate objects. On both fronts, the sisters simultaneously asked their enemies if they believed in love. Marie did, but Carrie did not, and they used their peak resentment to annihilate their foes.